G'day, welcome to Read the Bible. My name is Josh. I hope you're here to read the Bible and find out about Jesus, because that's what we'll be doing today. Welcome to the live stream. If you're just tuning in, feel free to comment below, post, ask questions, just say hi and hang out in the chat. And if you've got comments and things, we can try and get to them either today or pick it up tomorrow as we continue to read the story of Jesus. So what we've been doing is just taking 5 minutes to read through the next section of the book of Mark. So I've got my Bible here. Hope you've got a Bible either on your phone, on another tab on your computer or something like that. And what we're going to read today is Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 3 verse 6. And as we read, you might remember that last week, on Thursday, we saw Jesus doing some things that shocked people. He was eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners, and the religious leaders were horrified. How is it that Jesus can be hanging out with these people? These are the worst people. And Jesus had a message for them. I haven't come to call the righteous but sinners. Well, that conflict that started continues. And what we're going to read about today has to do with the Sabbath. I'll just tell you a little bit about the Sabbath before we read it. So the Sabbath was a day of rest for God's people, the Israelites. It remembered two big things. One, that God had created the world and then in 6 days and then rested. And the second, that God had rescued his people out of slavery in Egypt and brought them into the promised land, a land of rest. And so after working 6 days, the people of Israel were to take a Sabbath. They put down their tools on a Friday evening, stopped working, and had a day to rest, them and their servants and their animals and everything. It was a day that was dedicated to remembering the Lord and giving thanks to him, and also in anticipation of a rest that would come in the future. But let's see what happens this Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verse 23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields. And as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Now, what do you think is going to happen? Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and, deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Whoa, man, things turned fast, didn't they? Jesus has been doing these amazing miracles. He's welcoming in the worst people. Then we have these two things that happen on the Sabbath, and now there's a plot to kill him. What has just taken place? What is going on here that's so significant that these religious leaders, the Pharisees and the Herodians, who are like the people who are with Herod, the Jewish king, how is it that this religious party and political party get together and now start plotting to kill Jesus? What has just happened? Well, the first centered around David's disciples picking some grain. And the Pharisees questioned them, aren't you supposed to be resting? And Jesus said, look, in the Old Testament, the great King David, when he was in need, he went not just into the grain fields to get grain, but he went into the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which was set aside only for the priests. And he also gave some to his companions. So if the great King David could do that and be okay because of who he was, because he was God's anointed king, the one who's going to save Israel from their enemies. Well, when Jesus comes in and this lesser things happens, his disciples taking grain from the fields on the Sabbath, that's all right, because he says something huge about himself, which is the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. That Jesus is not just another guy, he's the Son of Man. He's this person that's anticipated in the Old Testament, one who would come into the kingdom and into the presence of God and inherit the kingdom of David, to rule over people from every nation for all time. He's saying, that's who is walking amongst you now, and I am Lord even of the Sabbath. But to appreciate just how much the Pharisees were tied to seeing people not work on the Sabbath, we have the second story as well. Because Jesus said, look, the Sabbath isn't made for men. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is, the Sabbath is a gift from God for your good. It's not the thing that you do to become right with God. And so another confrontation happens on the Sabbath. Now, the Pharisees this time looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So we know their motives. And there's a man in the synagogue with a withered hand. And so the scene is set. What is Jesus going to do? Is he going to do something publicly on the Sabbath that would lead to the Pharisees having a chance to accuse him? And Jesus exposes their hearts. He gets the man to publicly stand up and then asks this question, which is lawful to do on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? And they can't answer it. They can't answer it, which is lawful. Because the law on the Sabbath was to rest. But Jesus has reframed it. That, the Sabbath isn't the ruler here. The Sabbath is made for man. And you and I might hear that and we go, oh, obviously, it's always going to be lawful to do good. It's always going to be lawful to save life. It's how horrible that you would use this gift of God for rest to kill, to do evil, to bind this man with the withered hand in his distress and suffering. And as Jesus kind of exposes their hearts, he exposes like all religion, doesn't he? See, what the Pharisees are doing is they're taking this thing from God, the Sabbath. They're saying that if you will do this well enough, if you'll do it strictly enough, if you do it zealously enough, then the kingdom of God will come. God will come. We'll be right with God. This is what's going to fix everything. And you see that in all kinds of religion, right? If you do these practices enough, you fast enough, you give enough, you pray enough, you go to church enough, then you'll be right with God. Then things will get fixed up with you and God. And you can take good gifts of God, like prayer and church and stuff, and completely twist them. And Jesus exposes this religiousness that's gripped their heart, expose it as evil. And he says to the men, stretch out your hand. And he's publicly healed. And the Pharisees and the Herodians get it. He's completely overturning their religious life. Here is the one who's come, greater than David. Here is the one who's come, who saves on the Sabbath. Here is the one who gives life on the Sabbath. Here is the one that Sabbath's pointing towards. Here's the one who's going to bring the rest and peace and restoration of God. All that the creation promised, all that God's salvation of Israel promised, he's about to bring it. What do they do on the Sabbath? Well, they go out and they plan to kill him. Who do you think Jesus is? What's your thoughts about him? Well, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat, in the comments. Thanks for joining us today as we read the Bible. Things are getting pretty hot, aren't they? Already there is a plot afoot to kill Jesus. He's just started his ministry. let's see what's going to happen. Well, thanks for joining. I'll catch you same time tomorrow.